I was reading people's opinions about time somewhere, and one person said, "I always felt bad when my wife tells me that our intercourse doesn't last very long. Now I can tell her it only feels quick because of how much she is enjoying herself." Another person said, "At work, a 1 hour lunch break feels like 5 minutes." And a kid said, "Waiting 1 hour for soccer practice feels like a whole year." And that's when it really hit me. What is time really? And why does it feel like moving faster as we age? Those questions took me straight to Henri Bergson, a man who might help you understand time itself. And that is exactly the topic of today's video. So let's get into it. The pure present is an ungraspable advance of the past devouring the future. In truth, all sensation is already memory. Time is one of those mysteries we all feel deeply, yet struggle to explain. Almost everyone has heard an old person smile sadly and say, "Time really flies now." Psychologists often point out a simple explanation. As we age, each year becomes a smaller fraction of our life. For a 10-year-old, 1 year is 10% of their entire existence. For a 50-year-old, it is barely 2%. But that explanation feels incomplete. Something deeper is happening. Our experience of time itself changes. In childhood, life is packed with firsts. First day of school, first friendship, first journey, first heartbreak. Each moment feels full, vivid, and slow. As adults, routine takes over. Days repeat themselves. Weeks blur together. And suddenly we're wondering how entire years vanished without warning. Why does this happen? Henri Bergson would say the answer lies not in clocks, calendars, or mathematics, but in experience itself. Bergson insisted that clock time, the seconds ticking on a watch, is a poor guide to how we actually live time. Real time, he argued, is not something we measure, it is something we experience. He called this lived time duration, a qualitative flow of consciousness, not a series of separate moments. To explain this, Bergson used a powerful metaphor. He said the mind is like a tape or a spool slowly unrolling. Each new moment does not replace the previous one. It emerges from it, carrying the entire past along. Nothing is erased, everything accumulates. That is why, as Bergson put it, no two moments are identical in a conscious being. Every instant is unique because it contains the full weight of everything that came before it. And once a moment passes, it can never be repeated in exactly the same way. The flow of lived time is irreversible. We already know this intuitively. When we remember a childhood summer, we don't recall isolated snapshots. We remember a blend. The heat, the smells, the emotions, the feeling of endless afternoons. Our sense of now is always soaked in memory. That is what Bergson meant when he said, "All sensation is already memory." The present, in Bergson's words, devours the future, growing thicker and heavier with accumulated memory. This idea, that the present moment is a fusion of memory and sensation, sits at the very heart of Bergson's philosophy of time. So the first lesson is deeply Bergsonian. Time is not a thing in itself. It is the way consciousness unfolds. There is no sharp boundary between past, present, and future. The past lives inside the present, and the future is already forming within it. This idea will quietly run through every chapter that follows, as we continue to learn one of the greatest mysteries of human experience, time itself. Henri Bergson's philosophy stands out because it directly challenges the scientific way we usually think about time. Early in his career, especially in Time and Free Will, Bergson drew a sharp contrast between two kinds of time: inner lived time, which he called duration, durée, and the external mechanical time used by physics and clocks. For Bergson, the time we actually experience is not made of separate units. It is a qualitative multiplicity, a seamless flow in which moments melt into one another. They are not arranged like beads on a string. By contrast, scientific time is a quantitative multiplicity, a sequence of empty, identical instants that can be counted, measured, and numbered. Bergson warned that to claim that one can measure real duration by counting separate spatial constructs is an illusion, a philosopher's paraphrase of his idea. In doing so, we first create a mechanical explanation for a living process and then quietly replace reality with that explanation. We end up mistaking the map for the territory. At the core of all these images is one crucial idea. Duration is indivisible. As Bergson wrote, pure duration excludes all idea of juxtaposition, reciprocal exteriority, and extension. One moment cannot stand beside another the way objects do in space. Time flows. Each moment pours into the next like water, never stopping long enough to be separated. This has powerful implications for everyday life. When we feel anger, joy, or pain, we never experience a razor-thin instant. Every feeling is spread out. The anger of the present moment is tangled with the memory of what just happened and with anticipation of what might follow. For Bergson, we are not little clocks ticking off seconds. We are rivers of memory and feeling. Philosophically, this insight was radical. It suggested that science, powerful as it is, misses the essence of time when it treats it like space. In everyday language, we constantly talk about time as if it were an object. What time is it? Save time. Waste time. Bergson believed this way of speaking hides what time truly is. Duration, he argued, is not a thing. It is a movement, a creative process. He even went so far as to identify life itself with duration, famously writing, "To exist is to change is to mature is to go on creating oneself endlessly." This often cited paraphrase captures his core belief: life is a creative flow, and time is that flow. Bergson did not deny the usefulness of clocks. Scientific and everyday timekeeping is essential for coordinating actions, measuring intervals, and building technology. But these measured units are different in kind from the living time inside our minds. If Bergson's idea of duration is right, then the speeding up of time as we age cannot be explained by clocks alone. It must be tied to how memory, attention, and consciousness themselves change over a lifetime. Interestingly, modern psychology and neuroscience echo Bergson almost perfectly. They show that novelty and attention are the true governors of subjective time. In childhood, nearly everything is new. The brain is constantly encountering firsts and laying down rich, detailed memories. Psychologist Mark Whitman describes this beautifully. Children cram their days with firsts. These fresh experiences swarm the brain with new images to file away, stretching the subjective length of a single afternoon. Adults, by contrast, live much of life on replay. Work routines, familiar routes, repeated conversations, much of it runs on autopilot. With fewer novel snapshots to store, our weeks compress into a highlight reel of similar frames. As Whitman bluntly puts it, the feeling that time accelerates is tightly linked to how much new material our brains record each day. Neuroscience adds another layer to this picture. Every genuinely new experience triggers a surge of neural activity. When the brain encounters something unfamiliar, it flags it as important and encodes it richly. The more flags we raise, the more novel events we experience, the thicker our memory log becomes. And the thicker that log, the longer a period of life feels when we look back on it. There is also a physiological factor at play: processing speed. As we age, our brains and nervous systems transmit signals slightly more slowly. Some researchers compared time perception to watching a flipbook animation. Younger minds register more frames per second, producing a richer and more detailed stream of experience. Older or fatigued minds sample fewer frames. When Bergson said that memory conserves the past, he meant exactly this. Consciousness is saturated with what has already been lived. As a result, each new moment feels less novel and more fleeting. Not because it is empty, but because it feels strangely familiar. One of the most famous intellectual confrontations of the 20th century took place between Henri Bergson and Albert Einstein. In 1922, the two met publicly to debate the nature of time itself. Einstein's theory of relativity had recently transformed physics by fusing time and space into a single four-dimensional space-time. In this new framework, time became almost geometric. For Einstein, there is no universal now. Time is what clocks measure within their own frames of reference. What one observer calls present may be past or future to another. With time dilation, moving clocks running slow, and the relativity of simultaneity, time lost its privileged absolute status. At the Paris debate, Einstein summed up his position bluntly. Il n'y a donc pas un temps des philosophes. There is no philosopher's time. To Einstein, time simply is what clocks measure. Period. The flowing continuity of Bergson's duration sounded to him like metaphysical excess. From his perspective, separating time from space was an outdated idea, rendered obsolete by relativity. Bergson, however, was not concerned primarily with the time of equations. He was concerned with the time of consciousness. He openly acknowledged the power of Einstein's work, stating that the theory of relativity represents a very great advance, not only from the viewpoint of physics, but also from the viewpoint of philosophy. But he insisted that relativity speaks only about the mathematical behavior of clocks in motion, not about how time is actually lived. Their disagreement revealed two distinct meanings of time: the objective and the subjective. Most of Einstein's supporters concluded that relativity had rendered philosophical ideas of a flowing, universal time obsolete. In the public eye, Einstein was declared the winner of the debate. Yet many thinkers since then, including physicists and philosophers, have suggested that this verdict misses the point. It's like saying Newton defeated Goethe in a debate about color. They weren't really talking about the same thing. Einstein was addressing external timestamps. Bergson was addressing inner ones. The debate barely affected physics, and Einstein's contemporaries rarely mention it. But it remains a landmark moment in the history of ideas. So what is the philosophical lesson of this confrontation? It is that time wears two hats. In laboratories and space-time diagrams, time is a dimension. In the theater of the mind, time is a flowing drama. But what's important is how we should live it. In the end, living well in time means embracing change instead of resisting it. Life is not something that passes us by. It is something we participate in. We may not slow the clock, but we can make each moment worth remembering. Just remember this line by Bergson. Time flies over us, but leaves its shadow behind.